Chief Dom Pascal, who already believes that Commissioner Wallace Bowden is trying to get Christopher Herrmann to become Chief of 51, stares down Herrmann as the final scene of Chicago Fire's post-mortem concludes. Herrmann nods and looks back. The episode Permanent Damage from last week seems to lay that aside, even though the show does seem to be working toward that happening in the future. That is, until Randall Mouch McCullen disparages Pascal behind his back and pressures Herrmann to accept the role, unintentionally or intentionally escalating the conflict between the captain and the chief. Mouch of the Chicago Fire makes amends with Pascal before turning against him. Tensions between Mouch and Pascal were already high before to the catastrophic shock in Too Close, the 15th episode of Season 13 of Chicago Fire, which concluded with one of the most heartbreaking losses in the series. Pascal had even given Mouch a wonderful recommendation to the chief of another firehouse, encouraging him to apply for a lieutenant job there. In an interview with the firehouse chief, Mouch made it clear to Pascal that he had no plans to leave 51, particularly since Herrmann would be taking the chief test in a few months. In response, Pascal stated that he doesn't think Herrmann even wants to be chief, and that he isn't being entirely truthful if he claims differently. This was not the case, according to Mouch, who reiterates his position that he is not leaving 51. Later we find out that Mouch is interested in enrolling in the training course that Stella Kidd is taking in Maryland. Pascal just gave Kidd the necessary endorsement to travel, and although Mouch is keen to go, the only thing he receives from Pascal is a stern "I'll think about it." Pascal can harbor resentment, and he felt ashamed that he had to pull plows to secure Mouch the lieutenant interview, just to have Mouch turn it down. To make matters worse, Mouch starts his request with the words, "While I'm waiting for the lieutenant spot to open up here. Mouch, read the room." The unfavorable response to his request does motivate Mouch to put in more effort at the firehouse in an effort to prove to Pascal that he is worthy of the chance. Pascal is impressed and acknowledges that his efforts are not in vain by putting his name forward for the conference. However, later at Molly's, Mouch disparages Pascal behind his back to Herrmann, emphasizing that their grand scheme to assume 51 Feet's leadership will be realized in 3 weeks when the chief's test is held. Chicago Fire. Mouch's turn on Pascal is uncharacteristic. It's strange that Mouch betrayed Pascal on Chicago Fire for 2 reasons. To begin with, it was he who called Pascal to break the devastating news of his wife's terrible accident. In the epic One Chicago crossover event in the trenches, he nearly lost his own wife, Trudy. Therefore, it appears oddly insensitive of him to plot to remove the still grieving Pascal for his own ends. Squat Chicago Fire just put Herrmann and Pascal on a collision course. This was most recently made clear in the previous episode, Post-Mortem. Bowden, who is looking into the incident, hears Herrmann's harsh criticism of Pascal's choices surrounding the catastrophic call that resulted in Jack Damon's hospitalization. Bowden tells Herrmann that unless you're the one making the decisions and making sure all the factors are taken into consideration, then you can't place judgment on it. This lesson causes Herrmann to reevaluate his claim, as Bowden is not actively considering replacing Pascal as chief of 51. Even though he feels he is preparing his successor, Pascal has been actively teaching Herrmann what it takes to be a chief and has been nothing but helpful.